Most people get jewelry or a sentimental toast for their 30th birthday. My parents gave me a public execution disguised as a celebration. Standing in the center of Harbor and Vine, watching a room full of strangers laugh at a projection screen proving I did not belong to the family who raised me. I realized two things. My parents were cruel, and the strangers staring at me from the bar knew exactly who I really was. The radiator in my living room clanked with the metallic rhythm of a dying engine. It was 5 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, and the gray light of Riverton was just beginning to bruise the sky outside my window. I sat at my small, scratched dining table, the one I had dragged up 3 flights of stairs from a thrift store on 4th Street, and stared at the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop screen. 30 years old. In 3 weeks, I would be 30 years old. The number felt heavy, like a wet wool coat I could not take off. According to the timeline, my mother, Diane, had mentally drafted for me when I was in kindergarten. I was supposed to be a senior partner at a law firm by now. I was supposed to be married to a man with a jawline that could cut glass and a salary that could cover a mortgage in the Heights. I was supposed to be driving a European SUV and spending my weekends hosting brunch for other successful couples. Instead, I was a marketing manager for a mid-sized logistics firm, juggling 3 freelance graphic design gigs just to keep my head above the rising tide of my student loans. My apartment was clean, but the linoleum in the kitchen was peeling, and the view from my bedroom was a brick wall. I had $42 in my checking account until Friday, and my primary relationship was with the barista who knew not to burn my oat milk latte. My phone buzzed against the table, rattling a stack of overdue utility bills. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. My mother had an uncanny ability to sense when I was enjoying a moment of silence. I swiped the answer button. "Hello, Mom, Ellie." "Darling." Her voice was bright, too loud for the hour, vibrating with the manic energy she always adopted when she was planning something. "I hope I did not wake you. Your father and I were just looking at the calendar, and we realized the big day is coming up fast. We need to finalize the venue today." I rubbed my temples. "Mom, I told you, I really just want something small. Maybe dinner at that Italian place on Main. Just us and Kara." "Oh, stop it. You only turned 30 once. Eleanor." Diane used my full name only when she was annoyed or making a grand proclamation. "Mark and I are not going to let you sit in that dark apartment feeling sorry for yourself. We are doing Harbor and Vine. I already put the deposit down." My stomach turned over. Harbor and Vine was the most expensive restaurant in Riverton. It was where the city council members held their victory parties and where my father took his biggest commercial HVAC clients to sign contracts. It was a place of white tablecloths, hushed conversations, and appetizers that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Mom, that is too much," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I cannot let you spend that kind of money. It is a gift. Ellie, just say thank you. Besides, your father has invited a few people, the Hendersons, the Millers, maybe the guy from the bank who handled the loan for the new warehouse. It is a celebration. We want to show you off." I closed my eyes. They did not want to show me off. They wanted to show off the idea of me. They wanted to show off that Mark and Diane Collins, pillars of the Riverton business community, had a cohesive, happy, successful family. I was just a prop in the diorama. And, Diane continued, bulldozing right over my silence, "Mark has the most wonderful idea for a theme." "A theme?" I asked. "For a birthday dinner? Ancestry. Isn't that fun? Everyone is doing it now. Your father ordered those DNA kits for all of us. He wants to do a big slideshow reveal at the party. You know, trace the Collins line back to Scotland or wherever, and my side back to France. It will be a conversation starter. He sent yours over by courier yesterday. It should be at your building." I stared at the peeling paint on my windowsill, a DNA test. It seemed harmless enough. The kind of trendy, superficial activity my parents latched onto whenever they saw it on a morning talk show. But something about it made the hair on my arms stand up. "I do not know." "Mom," I said, That sounds like a lot of work for a dinner. It is already done. Ellie, the kit is paid for. Just spit in the tube and mail it back. Do not be difficult. Kara already did hers. Of course, Kara had already done hers. Kara, my younger sister by 4 years, never missed a beat. She was the golden child, the one who had actually followed the script. She was married to a dermatologist, lived in a pristine new-build subdivision, and had the kind of effortless charisma that made people want to lean in and listen to her talk about the weather. Fine, I whispered, defeated. I will do it. Good girl. Wear something red to the party, okay? Not that brown sack you wore to Christmas. You need color. It helps with your complexion. She hung up before I could say goodbye. That Sunday, I drove my 10-year-old sedan out to the suburbs for the mandatory family dinner. My parents lived in a sprawling colonial on a street where the lawns were manicured with surgical precision. My father's company, Collins Heating and Cooling, had done very well over the last decade, and the house was a monument to that success. When I walked in, the smell of roast beef and expensive cologne hit me. Mark Collins was standing in the foyer, holding a tumbler of scotch. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and loud, with a face that turned ruddy when he laughed or shouted. "There she is," he boomed, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "The birthday girl. Hi, Dad." I walked into the kitchen, where Diane was directing the housekeeper on how to arrange the salad forks. My mother was a small, fierce woman who managed her real estate business with the same terrifying efficiency she applied to her family. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my hips. "You look tired." "Ellie," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. Her lips barely grazed my skin. "And have you gained weight? That sweater is pulling a bit across the middle." "It is just the cut." "Mom," I lied. I had gained 5 pounds, mostly from stress-eating pretzels while working late nights. Kara was already at the island, sipping a glass of white wine. She looked perfect. As always, her hair was a glossy sheet of blonde, her skin glowing. She had the Collins nose, straight, narrow, aristocratic. I had always hated my nose. It was slightly snub, dusted with freckles that no amount of foundation could cover. It was just one of the many physical markers that made me feel like a changeling in my own home. "Happy early birthday." "Elle," Kara said, sliding a glass of wine toward me. "I heard about the party. Harbor and Vine? Fancy. It was not my idea." I muttered, taking a long sip of the wine. Mark walked in, beaming. "It is going to be the event of the season. I have got 3 developers coming who I have been trying to court for months. When they see what a fine family I have, they will know I am a man they can trust." He looked at me, his smile tightening just a fraction. "You are going to do something with your hair, right? Maybe straighten it? You look a bit wild." "I have curly hair." "Dad, it does what it wants." Diane sighed, tapping her nails on the granite counter. "We can book you a blowout. I will call my girl at the salon. Now, Mark, tell them about the slideshow." Mark's eyes lit up. "Right. The DNA thing. It is going to be great. I have this vision. See? We put up a big screen in the private dining room. We start with the old black and white photos of my grandfather, the one who came over from Glasgow with $5 in his pocket. Then we show the maps, the percentages. It proves we come from sturdy stock, resilience. It is a good narrative for the business. 2, he turned to me. "Did you do the kit yet?" "Not yet." I said, "I have been busy with work." "Do it tonight," he commanded, though he kept his tone jocular. "We need the results back in time for the party. The company says it takes 2 weeks. We are cutting it close." "Why does it matter so much?" I asked, feeling a sudden flare of irritation. "Can't we just have cake? Why do we need a genetic breakdown?" "Because it is fun." "Ellie," Diane snapped. "God, why do you always have to be the odd one? Why do you have to question everything? It is just a fun little activity for the family. Be a sport." The odd one. The phrase hung in the air, familiar and stale. I had heard it my whole life. Ellie is the odd one. Ellie is the sensitive one. Ellie takes things too seriously. I looked around the kitchen, the stainless steel appliances, the granite, the perfect sister, the successful parents. They fit together like pieces of a high-end puzzle. I felt like a piece from a different box that someone had jammed into the gap, fraying the edges just to make it stick. I remembered being 13 years old. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow, triggered by the tension in the room. I had been coming home from school early because of a migraine. I had walked through the front door, my sneakers silent on the plush carpet. I heard my mother on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice had been a hushed, frantic whisper. "The papers do not match. Mark told me to lock this down. If anyone digs into the dates, we are in trouble." No, she does not know. She can never know. I had walked into the kitchen then, my backpack thumping against the doorframe. Diane had spun around, her face draining of color. She had slammed the phone down so hard the receiver cracked. "What are you doing here?" she had screamed. "Why are you sneaking around?" "I am not sneaking," I had said, my head pounding. "Who were you talking to? What papers?" "Nothing." She had grabbed my shoulders, her fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Just business, boring tax stuff. Go to your room. Ellie, go." I had buried that memory for 17 years. I had filed it away under Mom being stressed about work. But now, standing in the kitchen as a grown woman, with my father obsessed with a DNA test, the memory surfaced with a new, chilling resonance. "I will do the test," I said quietly. "I will put it in the mail tomorrow." The next day at work was a blur of deadlines and demands. The logistics firm I worked for was rebranding, and the CEO wanted everything to look modern but traditional, a directive that meant absolutely nothing. I spent 4 hours tweaking the shade of blue on a logo, my eyes burning. At 2 p.m, Jonah stopped by my cubicle. Jonah was one of the account managers, a guy with messy brown hair and a penchant for wearing cardigans that looked like they belonged to a gentle librarian. He placed a coffee on my desk. "Oat milk latte. Extra hot." "You look like you are plotting a murder," he said softly. "I might be," I muttered, taking the cup. "My parents. The birthday. The usual." Jonah leaned against the partition. The big 3-0. "Are you dreading it?" "I am dreading the performance." I said, "They are turning it into a networking event. And they are making me take a DNA test so they can put my genetic history on a PowerPoint slide." Jonah frowned. "That is weirdly specific." "It is a control thing," I said, spinning my chair back and forth. "Everything with them is about the narrative. They want to prove we are this perfect, genetically superior clan. If I turn out to be 10% Neanderthal, my dad is going to be devastated." Jonah laughed, but his eyes were kind. "Hey, you know you can say no, right? You are an adult. You can tell them you do not want a party." I sighed. "It is not that simple. If I say no, I am the ungrateful daughter. I am the difficult one. It is easier to just put on the red dress, smile for the cameras, and go home." Jonah hesitated, then reached out and lightly touched my arm. "Just remember, Ellie, you are more than their narrative. You are the best designer in this building. You are funny as hell. And you are a good person. Don't let them make you feel small." I looked up at him, feeling a sudden lump in my throat. Jonah was the only person in my life, aside from my best friend Maya, who actually looked at me. Not at my potential, not at my flaws, but at me. "Thanks, Jonah," I whispered. He gave my arm a quick squeeze before pulling away. "Anytime. Now. Make that logo blue, but, like, a traditional blue." The weeks leading up to the party were a masterclass in micromanagement. Diane called me 3 times a day. She needed to approve my shoes. She needed to know if I was wearing my hair up or down. She strongly suggested up, to show off my neck, implying my neck was the only feature worth highlighting. She sent me a list of talking points for when I met Mark's business partners. Ask Mr. Henderson about his boat. Do not mention the recall on the HVAC units. It was exhausting. I felt less like a daughter and more like a candidate running for office. 2 days before the party, Diane dragged me to a high-end boutique downtown. She breezed through the racks, pulling out dresses that cost more than my car. "This one," she said, holding up a crimson sheath dress that looked like it was made for a runway model. "Try it on." I squeezed into the dress in the cramped fitting room. It was tight, unforgivingly tight. It clung to my hips and restricted my breathing. When I stepped out, Diane frowned. "Stand up straight. Ellie, suck it in." "I am sucking it in." "Mom." She walked around me, tugging at the fabric. "We will have to get you some shapewear. Serious shapewear. And maybe don't eat anything salty for the next 48 hours. We cannot have you looking bloated in the photos." "Why do the photos matter so much?" I asked, watching my reflection. I looked uncomfortable. I looked like a woman being strangled by red silk. "Because," Diane said, her voice dropping to a steely whisper, "because perception is reality. Eleanor, people treat you the way you present yourself. If you look like a success, people will believe you are one. We are giving you a platform. Do not squander it." I bought the dress, or rather, Mark paid for it, and I accepted the bag with a muttered apology. The night before the party, I was sitting on my living room floor with Maya. We were eating spicy Thai noodles out of takeout boxes and drinking cheap wine. Maya was a social worker, a woman who dealt with shattered families every single day. She had wild curls that she dyed purple and a laugh that could crack pavement. "So, let me get this straight," Maya said, waving a chopstick. "They are literally projecting your DNA onto a wall? Like, step right up and see the purebred Collins." "Essentially." I said, "That is psychotic. Truly. Who does that?" "Mark Collins." I said, "He thinks it connects us to history. He thinks it makes us look noble." Maya shook her head. "It sounds like he's trying to breed prize poodles. Are you worried about the results?" I shrugged. "Not really. I know who I am. I am the disappointment who lives in apartment 4B. A few percentages of Irish or German isn't going to change that." My phone buzzed on the floor between us. The screen lit up with a notification from the DNA testing app. "Your results are ready." I stared at it. My heart did a strange little flutter. "Open it," Maya said, leaning forward. "Let's see if you are related to royalty, or a serial killer." I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the icon. I felt a sudden wave of nausea. I remembered the phone call from when I was 13. The papers do not match. I tapped the notification. The app loaded. A spinning wheel of color. Then, a banner popped up at the top of the screen. "New close genetic match found." I frowned. That was fast. The app usually highlighted regions first. Western Europe, Scandinavia, whatever. But this was a direct alert about a specific person. I clicked on the alert. The text was small, but clear. Match strength. Unusually high. Relationship estimate. Close family. Uncle, grandparent, half-sibling. Name, James H. I stared at the name. James H. I did not know a James H. My father's brother was named Robert. My mother's side was all dead or estranged. But none of them were named James. "Who is James H.?" I whispered. "What?" Maya asked, scooting closer. I showed her the screen. "It says I have a close match. James H." Maya squinted. "Maybe a cousin you didn't know about? Or maybe your dad had a wild oat situation?" I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. My father was many things: arrogant, loud, controlling. But he was puritanical about fidelity. He treated marriage like a business contract. You did not breach the terms. "I do not know." I said. My thumb hovered over the button that said, "View relatives." My chest felt tight. The party was tomorrow. Tomorrow night. I had to stand in front of 100 people and smile. Tomorrow night. My father was going to put these results on a slide. If I opened this now, if I found out something complicated, I would not be able to fake it tomorrow. I knew myself. I was a terrible liar. If I found out my dad had a secret brother, or that my mom had an affair, it would be written all over my face, and Diane would destroy me for ruining her perfect evening. "I cannot look at this tonight," I said, my voice shaking. "Ellie," Maya said gently. It is probably just a glitch, or a second cousin. I cannot risk it, not with the party tomorrow. I need to get through the dinner. I need to get through the speeches. Then I will deal with James H. I swiped the notification away. I closed the app. You sure? Maya asked. I nodded, though my stomach was churning. Yeah, it can wait 48 hours. It is just data, right? It is not going anywhere. I put the phone face down on the carpet. I am going to bed, I said. I have to wake up early to put on my shapewear. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. I crawled into bed that night, but I did not sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the radiator clank. I kept thinking about the man named James, and the phone call in the kitchen, and the way my mother always looked at me like I was a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that tomorrow would just be a boring, pretentious dinner where I ate tiny crab cakes and smiled until my cheeks hurt. I had no idea that by this time tomorrow, the life I knew would be incinerated. I had no idea that the notification I had just swiped away was the fuse, and I was walking straight into the fire. The air inside Harbor and Vine smelled of truffle oil, expensive gin, and old money. It was a thick, cloying scent that stuck to the back of my throat the moment I walked through the heavy oak double doors. I smoothed the front of the crimson dress Diane had forced me to buy, my hands trembling slightly against the silk. The fabric was so tight, it felt less like clothing and more like a casing, compressing my ribs every time I tried to take a deep breath. I had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that my parents would keep the decorations subtle. Harbor and Vine was a place of dark wood and low lighting, a venue that demanded a certain level of decorum, but as I stepped into the private event room my father had rented, I stopped dead in my tracks. A banner, easily 10 feet long, was strung across the far wall behind the head table. It read, "Happy 30 years. Ellie," in glittering gold letters, but it was the background of the banner that made my stomach drop. It was a collage of photos, not the flattering, carefully curated ones I might have chosen, but a parade of my most awkward, vulnerable moments. There was me at 14, face full of metal braces, skin angry with acne, squinting into the sun. There was me at 9, crying over a dropped ice cream cone, looking red-faced and bratty. There was a photo from my college graduation where the wind had blown my hair across my face, making me look disheveled while Kara stood next to me. Perfect and poised, I felt like a prop. I felt like a specimen pinned to a board. "Ellie!" My mother's voice cut through the ambient jazz. Diane swept toward me, a vision in silver sequins. She looked frantic and exhilarated, her eyes scanning me for flaws before she even reached me. "You are late," she hissed, grabbing my shoulders and planting 2 airy, wet kisses near my ears, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "I am 5 minutes early." "Mom," I said, pulling back. "The banner? Really? It is cute," Diane insisted, her nails digging slightly into my bare arms. "It shows character. It shows how far you have come. Now, stand up straight. Your posture is terrible." She spun me around before I could protest. A photographer I did not recognize was prowling the perimeter of the room, snapping photos with a large, distinct flash. "Oh, before I forget," Diane said, holding out a velvet-lined basket. "We are doing a digital detox for the first hour. The photographer needs candid shots. Real emotion, no screens blocking faces. Hand it over." I clutched my clutch bag tighter. "Mom, I am 30 years old. I am not giving you my phone." "Eleanor," she said, her voice dropping to that dangerous low register she used when she was about to cause a scene. "Mark's biggest client, Mr. Sterling, is already here. Do not embarrass me by clinging to your phone like a teenager. Everyone else is doing it. Look." I looked at the entry table. Sure enough, a pile of iPhones and Samsungs sat in the basket, tagged with little numbered stickers. Even Mark's phone was there. "Fine," I snapped. I pulled my phone out. The screen was dark, hiding the notification I had ignored the night before. James H. The name flashed in my mind for a second. a ghost in the machine. I dropped the phone into the basket. "Good girl," Diane said, instantly brightening. "Now, go mingle. The Sterlings are by the bar. Be charming." I drifted into the room, feeling unmoored. Without my phone, I had no shield, no way to look busy if I found myself standing alone. The room was filling up fast. I recognized about 20% of the people. The rest were strangers. Suits my father wanted to impress, women from my mother's real estate circle, and extended cousins I had not seen since I was 12. My best friend Maya was by the buffet, looking distinctly out of place in her vintage velvet dress amidst the sea of designer cocktail attire. Jonah was with her, looking uncomfortable in a tie. I started to move toward them, desperate for a friendly face, but my father intercepted me. "Ellie?" Mark Collins boomed. He was holding a scotch, his face already flushed with the bonhomie of hosting. "Come here. I want you to meet Gary Sterling. Gary, this is the birthday girl. The reason we are all drinking the good stuff tonight." Mr. Sterling, a man with a handshake like a vice, looked me up and down. "Happy birthday. Young lady, your father tells me you are in marketing." "Yes," I said, forcing a smile that made my jaw ache. "I work for—" "She is a creative," Mark interrupted, clapping a hand on my back. "A free spirit. Always has been. We Collinses are usually numbers people, builders. But Ellie here, she marches to the beat of her own drum." He said it with a laugh, but the undertone was clear. She is the anomaly. She is the one who does not fit. As Mark launched into a story about his golf handicap, my gaze wandered to the bar. There was a man standing at the far end, away from the crush of bodies. He was not drinking. He had a club soda with a lime wedge in front of him. Untouched. He looked to be in his early 50s, wearing a suit that was well made but slightly out of date, the lapels a bit too wide for current fashion. He had graying hair and a face that looked etched with exhaustion, but it was his eyes that caught me. He was staring right at me. It was not a creepy stare. It was not the way men sometimes looked at women in bars. It was intense, searching, almost mournful. He looked like he was trying to solve a riddle. When our eyes met, he did not look away. He held my gaze for a second, then gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Who is that?" I wondered. One of Dad's subcontractors? A distant relative from the breakdown on the slide? "Ellie, pay attention." Mark hissed in my ear, jarring me back to the conversation. "Gary asked you a question. I am so sorry," I stammered, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. It is just a lot of excitement. Dinner was an exercise in endurance. I was seated at the head table between my father and Mr. Sterling's wife, a woman who spent 40 minutes talking about her poodle's dietary restrictions. Kara sat across from me, glowing in a champagne-colored gown, holding hands with her husband. "You doing okay?" Kara mouthed to me when the waiters were clearing the salad plates. I just gave a tight nod. I felt like I was vibrating. The room was too loud. The lights were too bright, and the banner with my crying face loomed over me like a bad omen. After the main course, filet mignon that I barely touched, Mark stood up. He tapped his spoon against his crystal wine glass. The sharp ting-ting-ting silenced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends, family," Mark began, his voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our Eleanor. 30 years. It goes by in a blink, doesn't it?" A ripple of polite laughter went through the crowd. "We wanted to do something special tonight." Mark continued. "We wanted to take a look back, not just at the last 30 years, but deeper. We wanted to look at the roots." He gestured to the wall, where a projector screen began to descend from the ceiling. "As many of you know, Diane and I have been getting into genealogy lately." Mark said, "It is fascinating stuff. Seeing where we come from, seeing what makes a Collins a Collins." Diane stood up next to him, beaming. "So, we thought it would be fun to share the results tonight. A little science to go with the cake." The lights dimmed, the projector whirred to life. The slideshow began innocuously enough, It started with sepia-toned photos of my father's grandparents in front of a brick row house. Mark narrated with gusto. "Scots Irish," he declared. "Coal miners and bricklayers. That is where the work ethic comes from. That is the Collins grit." Then it switched to Diane's side. French and German. Farmers. Salt of the earth. Then, the focus shifted to me. The slide changed to a video clip. It was grainy home footage from the 90s. It showed me at age 5, sitting in the middle of the living room floor, refusing to open a Christmas present because the wrapping paper was too pretty. My father's voiceover boomed through the speakers. "And here is Ellie, always a bit particular. Most kids rip the paper off. Ellie cried because she didn't want to ruin the tree pattern. Sensitive soul, right? Or just difficult?" The crowd laughed. It was a warm, knowing laugh, but it stung. The next slide was me at 10, failing spectacularly at a soccer game, tripping over the ball and face-planting into the mud. Not exactly an athlete. Mark chuckled into the room. Kara was the striker. Ellie was the one picking daisies in the goal box. More laughter. I stared at the table, my hands gripping the napkin in my lap. This was their version of affection, teasing, highlighting my failures to show they loved me anyway. But tonight, in front of 100 people, it felt less like love and more like a roast I had not agreed to. Then, the tone shifted, and finally, Mark said, his voice taking on a theatrical weight, the big reveal. "We got the results back from the lab yesterday. We wanted to see exactly what makes our Ellie tick. We thought, maybe there is some Italian in there? Maybe some Greek? That would explain the temper." He laughed at his own joke. Diane giggled nervously beside him. The screen flickered. A chart from the DNA company appeared. It was a simple bar graph. Mark Collins, 50% father. Diane Collins, 50% mother. Wait, that was the control slide. The next slide clicked into place. Eleanor Collins. The bars were empty. The text was stark and bold against the white background. Genetic match to Mark Collins, 0%. Genetic match to Diane Collins, 0%. The room went silent. Mark let the silence hang for a moment. A grin plastered on his face. "Would you look at that?" he announced, spreading his arms wide. 0%. We always joked she was switched at birth. We always said she was the milkman's kid. Well, folks, here's the proof. She has never really been one of us, right? He laughed. A big, booming, belly laugh. It was a sound that shattered the world. Diane stepped forward, grabbing his arm, her smile brittle and shaking. "Oh, stop it. Mark." She turned to the crowd, her eyes wide and manic. "It is just a joke." "Well, sort of. We did get the results, and it seems there was, well, maybe a little mistake in the hospital? Or maybe I had a very fun summer in '95 that I forgot about." She winked. She actually winked. "But," Diane continued, her voice trembling with a performative sweetness that made my skin crawl, "it does not matter. That is the point. We chose to love Ellie anyway. Even if the paper says 0%. We kept her. We raised her. We dealt with the moods and the art degrees and the distinct personality. We are her parents, because we say we are. Isn't that right, sweetie?" She looked down at me, expecting me to smile, expecting me to laugh along with the crowd at the implication that my mother was a cheater or that I was a biological error they had graciously decided to tolerate. The room was in chaos. People were laughing, but it was the jagged, uncomfortable laughter of people who did not know where to look. I saw Mr. Sterling staring at his plate. I saw Kara cover her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with horror, but mostly, I saw the chart. 0%. My ears were ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the clinking of silverware. They knew. They had to have known. You do not put a slide like that up without checking it first. They had seen the results, seen that I was not their daughter, and decided to turn it into a party trick. They had decided that the funniest way to reveal my genetic isolation was as the punchline to a speech about their own benevolence. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Ellie?" Mark said, his smile faltering slightly. Sit down, kiddo. We have not gotten to the cake. Is it true? I asked. My voice was quiet. But in the hush of the room, it carried, "What?" Mark asked. "Is it true?" I repeated. Louder this time. I pointed at the screen. "Am I adopted? Or did you have an affair? Mom? Which is it? Because that is not a joke. That is a medical document." Diane laughed, a high, nervous trill. "Oh, Ellie, do not be so dramatic. It is just a theme. We are celebrating. You are humiliating me," I screamed. The sound tore out of my throat, raw and ugly. The guests flinched. "I am 30 years old, and you are standing there telling a room full of strangers that I do not belong to you, that I am a mistake you chose to keep." Mark's face hardened. The jovial host mask dropped, replaced by the stern, disappointed father I knew so well. "Okay, that is enough," he snapped. "You are making a scene. Sit down. You are ruining the evening." "Ruining the evening?" I choked out a laugh. "You just told everyone I am not your daughter." "I said be grateful," Mark shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Be grateful we kept you. Do you have any idea how much money we spent on you? Braces, college, this damn party? We took you in. We gave you a name. And this is how you repay us? By screaming at us in front of my clients?" The words hung in the air like smoke. "We took you in." So it was true. It was not an affair. It was not a hospital mix-up. They had taken me in. And they had never told me. I looked at Diane. She was refusing to meet my eyes, picking at a loose sequin on her dress. "You lied to me," I whispered. "My whole life. Every time you told me I did not have the Collins nose. Every time you told me I was the odd one. You knew. You knew the whole time. Ellie, please." Kara stood up, reaching for my hand. Her face was wet with tears. "Just come with me. Let's go to the bathroom." I pulled my hand away. "No," I said. I looked at Mark, then at Diane. I looked at the banner with my crying face on it. "I am done. I am not your prop, and I am definitely not your daughter." I turned and ran. I ran through the tables, knocking into a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes. Glass shattered. Liquid splashed onto the floor. But I did not stop. I burst through the double doors, gasping for air. The heavy scent of truffles replaced by the cool, stale air of the hallway. I pushed through the main entrance of the restaurant and stumbled out into the parking lot. The night air was freezing. It hit my bare arms like ice. But the cold felt good. It felt real. "Ellie, wait!" Maya was running after me, her heels clicking on the asphalt. She caught up to me at my car. Grabbing me in a hug before I could even get the keys out, I collapsed into her. I sobbed. Big, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. They knew. I gasped into her shoulder. "Maya, they knew. I know. Baby, I know." Maya soothed, stroking my hair. "They are monsters. Absolute monsters. Breathe. Just breathe." I fumbled for my keys, but my hands were shaking so badly I dropped them. Maya bent down to pick them up. "You are not driving," she said firmly. "Get in my car. We are leaving. We are going to my place." I nodded, unable to speak. I wiped my face, my hand coming away smeared with mascara and foundation. I felt stripped, hollowed out, as Maya guided me toward her hatchback. I glanced back at the restaurant entrance. The heavy wooden door was open. A figure stood in the warm light spilling out onto the pavement. It was the man from the bar, the man in the dated suit. He was not looking at me this time. He was speaking to a valet attendant, gesturing toward the parking lot. I saw his lips move. He was calm, precise. I watched as the valet nodded and pointed toward where I was standing. The man turned his head. For a second, across the rows of parked luxury cars, we locked eyes again. He did not come over. He did not wave. He just watched me, a look of profound sadness and resolve on his face. Then, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. "Who is that?" Maya asked. Unlocking her car. "I do not know," I whispered. "Come on," Maya said, opening the passenger door. "Let's get you out of here." We sat in Maya's car for 20 minutes before she started the engine. She let me cry until there were no tears left, just a dry, aching heaviness in my chest. "Here," she said softly, handing me a wet wipe from her glove compartment. "Clean your face. You look like a raccoon." I laughed. A weak, jagged sound. "Thanks." I scrubbed at my eyes. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold dread. I was 30 years old, and I had no parents. The people I had called Mom and Dad for 3 decades had viewed me as an investment, a project, a charity case they could brag about. "Be grateful we kept you." My phone, I sat up straight. My phone was still in the basket. Oh God, Maya, my phone, it is inside. Maya shook her head. "No, it is not. I grabbed it on my way out. I grabbed yours and mine. I was not leaving them with those psychopaths." She reached into her purse and pulled out my phone. She handed it to me. I held the device in my hands. It felt heavy. The screen lit up. There was a notification still sitting there. The one I had ignored 24 hours ago. New close genetic match found. James H. I stared at the name. James H. I thought about the man at the bar, the man who had been watching me, the man who had seemed to know me before I even arrived. "Maya," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Yeah? I think I know who was at the bar." I unlocked the phone. I tapped the notification. The app opened. I clicked on the profile for James H. There was a small, blurry thumbnail photo. I zoomed in. It was him. It was the man in the suit, the man with the sad eyes, the man who had just watched my parents destroy me and hadn't said a word. But below his name, there was a message. It had been sent 2 hours ago, while I was getting dressed for the party. Subject: urgent, family matter. "Dear Eleanor, my name is James Hartley. I believe I am your uncle. I have been looking for you for a very long time. Please, do not trust Mark and Diane Collins with this information yet. I need to speak with you. I will be at Harbor and Vine tonight. I just need to see that you are safe." I read the message 3 times. I have been looking for you. My parents, Mark and Diane, had said they kept me, as if I were a stray dog they had found on the porch. But James Hartley said he had been looking for me. A shiver went through me, but it was not from the cold. It was the feeling of the ground shifting, of the world tilting on its axis. "Drive," I said to Maya. "Where to?" "Anywhere," I said, clutching the phone to my chest. "Just get me away from them." Maya started the car. As we pulled out of the lot, I looked back at the restaurant one last time. I saw Mark standing in the window, gesturing angrily at someone I could not see. I turned away. I looked down at the phone, at the tiny digital face of the stranger who claimed to be my blood. I was not Ellie Collins. I did not know who I was. But as we sped onto the highway, leaving the wreckage of my 30th birthday behind, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to find out. The fluorescent lights of the office hallway hummed with a frequency that seemed to vibrate directly against my skull. It was Tuesday, 3 days after the party, and I was hiding in the 3rd-floor handicap stall of the women's restroom, pressing a cold paper towel against my neck. I had spent the last 72 hours in a state of dissociative fugue. I had gone through the motions, waking up, brushing my teeth, feeding my cat, driving to work, but I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was terrified that someone had recorded Mark's speech. I was terrified that the moment of my public evisceration was currently circulating on a group chat or worse, a public feed. My fear was not unfounded. That morning, while drinking coffee that tasted like battery acid, I had made the mistake of checking Instagram. My cousin Tyler, a 22-year-old who worked at a vape shop and considered himself an amateur influencer, had posted a story. It was a shaky video, clearly taken from his lap. The frame was dominated by the back of someone's head, but in the distance, the projector screen was visible. It showed the bar graph, the one with the empty columns next to my name, 0% match. The caption read, followed by 3 crying laughing emojis and a skull. "Uncle Mark is savage for this one." I had stared at the screen. the blood draining from my face. It was up for 4 hours. How many people had seen it? How many of Tyler's friends, people I did not know, had laughed at the woman being disowned by a PowerPoint presentation? I had texted Tyler immediately. Take it down. Now. He had replied with a single word. Chill. But 10 minutes later, after I threatened to call his mother, my aunt, who was terrified of scandal, the video disappeared. It was gone, but the damage was done. My humiliation was not just a memory. It was digital content. It was a joke. I threw the paper towel into the trash and unlocked the stall door. I washed my hands, scrubbing them until the skin was pink and raw. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were rimmed with red, and the concealer I had applied that morning was already creasing. Get it together. Ellie, I told my reflection, you have a marketing deck to present at 2 o'clock, but I could not focus on marketing. I could not care about fonts or engagement metrics when my entire identity had been dismantled. I went back to my desk, sat down, and opened the DNA app on my phone. I had been avoiding it. Since that night in Maya's car, I had not looked at the data again. I had been too afraid of what it might say, or perhaps too afraid that it would confirm what I already knew, that I was untethered. I took a deep breath and tapped the icon. The screen loaded, bright and cheerful, completely at odds with the crater it had blown in my life. I navigated past the ethnic heritage map, mostly British Isles and Scandinavia, utterly generic, and went straight to the DNA Matches tab. The list populated, at the very top, marked with a gold star for close family, was the name that had haunted me since the night before the party. James H. Possible relationship. Uncle, grandparent, half-sibling. Shared DNA. 24%. 24%. I clicked on the little eye icon next to the percentage. The app explained that this amount of shared DNA typically indicated a grandparent, an aunt or uncle, or a half-sibling. I scrolled down. Below James H., the names were a jumble of strangers. There were second cousins, third cousins, people with surnames I had never heard of. Hartley, Vance, Thorne, McAllister. Where were the Collinses? Where were the Millers? My mother's maiden name? I used the search bar to filter for Collins. No matches found. I searched for Miller. No matches found. I sat back in my chair, the breath leaving my lungs in a rush. It was definitive. It was mathematical proof. There was not a single drop of blood connecting me to the people who had raised me. Mark's slideshow had been cruel, but it had been accurate. I looked at the profile for James H. Again, he had no bio, no location listed, just that initials and the high match percentage. But he had a family tree linked to his profile. I clicked it. The tree was sparse. It started with a couple born in the 1920s. Leonard and Sarah Hartley. They had a son, James, and a daughter, Margaret Hartley. The name sat there on the screen, innocuous and heavy. Underneath her name, there was no death date, but there was no other information either. No spouse, no children listed, except for me. The algorithm had placed me, tentatively, as a descending branch from Margaret. A dotted line connected my profile to hers. Eleanor, I felt a phantom ache in my chest. Was Margaret my mother? Was she the woman Diane had whispered about on the phone all those years ago? The papers do not match. I needed answers, and I knew I was not going to get them from a genealogy app. I minimized the window and opened my email. I could not call my parents. If I heard Mark's booming voice telling me to calm down, or Diane's breathy, victimized tone, I would scream. I needed a paper trail. I needed to say exactly what I meant without being interrupted. 2. Mark Collins, H. V. I see, Diane Sells. Riverton Gmail. Subject, the truth, Mom and Dad. I am not coming to Sunday dinner. I am not answering your calls until you tell me the truth. And I mean the actual truth, not the version you tell your friends to make yourselves look good. I have looked at the full report. I have zero genetic connection to either of you. I am not asking for a slideshow. I am asking for the basic human decency you denied me on my birthday. Was I adopted? Did you buy me? Did Mom have an affair that you covered up? You stood on a stage and told people I was a mistake you chose to keep. If you want to have any relationship with me going forward, you need to tell me exactly how I came into this family. Who is Margaret Hartley? Do not tell me to calm down. Do not tell me I am being dramatic. Tell me who I am. Ellie, I hit send. My hand was shaking so hard, the mouse cursor skittered across the screen. I stared at the sent folder for a long time, waiting. The response from Diane came 20 minutes later. It was classic Diane. The truth, Ellie, honey, I am so sad you are choosing to react this way. Your father and I have been crying all morning. We just wanted to have a fun night and you have turned it into this dark, angry thing. Life is complicated. Ellie, adult things are complicated. Sometimes people make agreements because they want to give a child a better life. We gave you everything. We gave you a home, piano lessons, a car. Does biology really matter more than who changed your diapers? Who sat up with you when you had the chicken pox? Please, just take a few days to cool off. We can talk when you're ready to be reasonable and remember who your real family is. We love you. Even when you hurt us. Love, Mom. I read it twice, feeling a rising bile in my throat. It was a masterpiece of deflection. She hadn't answered a single question. She had just pivoted back to her own martyrdom. We gave you piano lessons, as if paying for lessons entitled them to lie to me about my existence for 3 decades. Then, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Stop overreacting. The party was a joke gone wrong. You know how I am. I thought it would be funny to show how different we are. DNA tests are garbage anyway. Basically entertainment. They get things wrong half the time. Stop digging for drama where there isn't any. See you Sunday. I threw my phone onto the desk. It landed with a loud clatter that made my cubicle neighbor, a quiet woman named Sarah, look up in alarm. Sorry, I muttered. Dropped it. They were gaslighting me. Even now, with the charts staring them in the face, they were refusing to acknowledge reality. Mark was calling science entertainment. Diane was calling adoption complicated adult things. They were banking on the fact that I would eventually tire myself out, accept their non-answers, and fall back in line, because that is what I had always done. I was Ellie the peacemaker, Ellie the sensitive one, Ellie who didn't want to make waves, but looking at Mark's text, seeing him dismiss my identity crisis as a joke gone wrong, something in me snapped. The tether that had held me to them. The obligation, the guilt, the desperate need for approval, finally frayed and broke. I picked up my phone again. I did not reply to Mark. I did not reply to Diane. Instead, I opened the DNA app. There was a message waiting in my inbox. It wasn't from a bot. It wasn't a generic welcome email. It was from J. Hartley. I opened it, my heart rate spiking. Subject: Hello from a relative. Dear Eleanor, I hope this message finds you, though I imagine you are overwhelmed right now. I sent a brief note to your phone the night of your birthday, but I wanted to follow up through this secure channel. My name is James Hartley. As the DNA results indicate, we are close family. Based on the markers, I believe I am your uncle, though there is a small possibility I am a first cousin once removed. I have been searching for a missing member of our family, my Uncle Leonard's granddaughter, for the better part of 5 years. Your genetic profile matches the specific parameters we have been looking for. The location, the age, and the biological markers all align. I know this is frightening. I know you have likely been told a very different story about your origins. I am not asking for money, and I am not asking for anything other than a few minutes of your time. I have documents that I believe belong to you, if you are willing. I would like to speak with you, video or voice, whichever you prefer. Sincerely, James Hartley. I stared at the words, polite, measured, specific. It was the complete opposite of Mark's blustering texts. This man wrote like an engineer. He wrote like someone who cared about facts. I have been searching for you. I minimized the message and went back to his profile. I tapped on the profile picture again. It was small, but the resolution was decent. I zoomed in until the pixels started to blur. It was him. There was no doubt. The receded hairline, the serious set of the mouth, the deep-set eyes. It was the man who had stood at the bar at Harbor and Vine, the man who had sipped club soda and watched my father humiliate me. Why had he been there? If he was searching for me, why hadn't he walked up to me? Why had he let it happen? A wave of suspicion washed over me. Was this a scam? Was he some kind of con artist who targeted people with confused family histories? But how would he have known to be at the restaurant? Wait, Diane had made the party public on Facebook. She had posted the invitation weeks ago, tagging me and the restaurant. Come celebrate Ellie. If he had been searching for Eleanor Collins, or monitoring the name, he could have found the event. I looked at the message again. I have documents that I believe belong to you. My curiosity was a physical ache. I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Behind me was the burning house of my parents' lies. Ahead of me was a terrifying drop into the unknown. But I couldn't go back into the house. I typed a reply. Mr. Hartley, I saw you at the restaurant. You were at the bar. I am free to talk now. Ellie. I hit send. The reply came almost instantly. I am available. Here's a link for a secure video call. I grabbed my bag. I could not do this at work. I could not have this conversation with Sarah listening from the next cubicle. I walked out of the office. I didn't tell my manager. I didn't clock out. I just walked to the elevator, went down to the parking garage, and got into my car. I drove to a park a few blocks away, a quiet spot by the river where people walk their dogs. I parked in the back corner of the lot, under the shade of a dying oak tree. I propped my phone up on the dashboard. My hands were trembling. I took a deep breath, checked my reflection. I looked terrified, but I didn't care, and clicked the link. The screen went black for a second. Connecting. Then, a face appeared. James Hartley was sitting in what looked like a home office. Behind him were shelves lined with thick binders and technical manuals. He was wearing a simple gray sweater, and he had put on reading glasses. He looked up at the camera, and his expression softened. Hello. Eleanor, he said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and calm. Hi, I said. My voice sounded small in the car. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. He said, I imagine you are feeling besieged right now. That is one word for it. I said, Who are you? Really? He took off his glasses and set them on the desk. I am James. I am a structural engineer, retired now, and I'm the trustee of the Hartley Family Trust. He paused, looking at me with that same searching intensity I had seen at the bar, and he continued, I am your mother's brother, which makes me your uncle. My mother, I repeated. You mean Margaret? He nodded. Margaret, my younger sister. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Margaret, not Diane. Margaret, where is she? I asked. Is she dead? James hesitated. A shadow crossed his face. No, she is not dead, but she is. She has had a difficult life. Eleanor, that is a conversation for later. When you are ready, right now, I want to talk about you and about my Uncle Leonard. Who is Leonard? Leonard Hartley was my father's brother. James said he was a stubborn, brilliant man. He made a fortune in patent law and investments. But his life's great tragedy was losing contact with Margaret, and by extension, with you. He leaned forward slightly. Eleanor, Leonard knew you existed. He knew Margaret had a baby in Riverton in May of 1994. He knew she gave that baby up. Gave me up? I asked. The words tasting like ash. James held up a hand. Not exactly. It wasn't a formal adoption through an agency. It was informal, private. Margaret was very young, very troubled, and she was in a desperate situation. She made an arrangement with a couple, the Collinses. I gripped the steering wheel. An arrangement. Leonard spent the last 10 years of his life trying to find you. James said quietly. He hired investigators. He chased leads, But the records were sealed or non-existent because the adoption wasn't processed through the state channels in the usual way. It was done quietly, off the books, off the books. The papers do not match. Diane's whisper echoed in my head. Why? I asked. Why off the books? Because, James said, his eyes hardening. That is how Mark and Diane wanted it. It is cheaper, and it is cleaner. It leaves fewer trails. He took a breath. When Leonard died 2 years ago, he left a specific instruction in his will. He established a trust, a significant trust. It is designated for his granddaughter, Eleanor Hartley, and he named me the trustee, with the sole duty of finding you and ensuring you received what was yours. I stared at the man on the screen. Money? This was about money? I do not want money. I said, I just want to know why they lied. I know, James said gently, and the money is secondary, but the trust gave me the resources to use forensic genealogy. That is how I found you. The DNA test you took? I managed several kits from our family members in the databases, waiting for a match, when your results uploaded. The system pinged me immediately. He paused. I flew into Riverton 3 days ago. I wanted to see you. I wanted to confirm you were the right person before I disrupted your life. I found the listing for your birthday party. I thought I would just observe. See if you looked happy. See if you looked like her, did I? I asked. Look like her? You look exactly like her, James said, a small, sad smile touching his lips, especially around the eyes. He sighed. I did not expect what happened that night. I did not expect them to. To present a PowerPoint of my genetic isolation? I offered dryly. It was cruelty. James said, plain and simple. I almost stepped in. I almost walked up to that table and shut it down. But I realized that would only cause a bigger scene. And I didn't want to frighten you more than you already were. I looked out the window of the car. A woman was throwing a tennis ball for a golden retriever. The dog looked so happy, so uncomplicated. So, what happens now? I asked. James picked up a folder from his desk. He held it up to the camera. I have documents. Eleanor. Copies of the original hospital discharge papers. A copy of the private agreement your parents signed with Margaret. Or rather, the agreement they pressured her to sign. And I have letters. Letters? Letters Leonard wrote to you. Letters Margaret wrote, which were never delivered. My heart stopped. Letters. I want to show these to you. James said, I do not want to do it over a screen. I want you to hold them. I want you to see the dates. I want you to see the truth in black and white. He lowered the folder. Will you meet me? I am staying at the Courtyard Marriott downtown. We can meet there, or anywhere you feel safe. Bring a friend if you want. Bring a lawyer. I looked at his face. He looked tired, but patient. He looked like a man who had been carrying a heavy load for a long time and was finally ready to set it down. I thought about Mark telling me to stop overreacting. I thought about Diane telling me to remember who changed my diapers. They had tried to erase my history. They had tried to paint over the truth with a coat of suburban beige. James Hartley was offering me the paint stripper. I will meet you. I said, okay, James said. When? Tomorrow. I said, 10 o'clock. There is a coffee shop on 3rd Street called The Daily Grind. It is public. It is busy. Perfect, James said. I know it. I hesitated. James? Yes? Thank you. For looking. He nodded, and for a moment. He looked like he might cry. We never stopped looking. Eleanor. Not for a day. The screen went black. I sat in the silence of my car for a long time. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the dashboard. I felt strange. I felt shaken, but for the first time in 3 days. I did not feel like a ghost. I felt like someone with a story. It wasn't the story I had thought I was living, but it was mine. I started the car. I had to go home. I had to prepare. I was about to step out of the life of Ellie Collins and into the life of Eleanor Hartley, and I had a feeling that once I crossed that threshold, there would be no turning back. The coffee shop James had chosen was called The Alchemist's Cup. It was in the West End, a neighborhood of crumbling brick warehouses slowly being converted into lofts, far enough from my parents' suburban stronghold that I did not have to worry about running into one of Diane's tennis partners. I arrived 20 minutes early. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock my car door. I bought a black coffee I had no intention of drinking and found a table in the back corner. Facing the door, I sat there, vibrating with a mixture of terror and adrenaline, watching the entrance. When James Hartley walked in, he looked exactly as he had on the video call, only more solid. He wore a dark wool coat and carried a leather satchel that looked decades old. He scanned the room, spotted me, and walked over with a calm, purposeful stride that made him seem like the only grounded object in a spinning world. "Eleanor," he said, nodding to me. "Hi," I said. My voice was tight. He sat down across from me. He did not waste time with small talk. He did not ask me how I was feeling or comment on the weather. He simply placed the satchel on the table, unbuckled the straps, and began to lay out objects with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. First, a thick manila envelope, then, a blue legal folder, finally, a small, worn notebook with a black cover. He clasped his hands on the table and looked at me. "I want you to look at these documents," he said. "I want you to read them. I will answer any questions you have, but the papers speak for themselves." He slid the blue folder toward me. I opened it. The first page was a copy of a last will and testament. The name at the top was Leonard Arthur Hartley. The date was from 4 years ago. I scanned the legalese, my eyes blurring until they caught a specific paragraph highlighted in yellow. Article 4. The Trust. I hereby establish the Eleanor Hartley Trust, funded by the liquidation of the Hartley patent portfolio, for the sole benefit of my granddaughter, Eleanor Hartley, born to my daughter, Margaret Hartley, on or about May 3rd, 1994, in Riverton. I stared at the date. My birthday. Instructions to trustee. The trustee shall use all available resources, including but not limited to private investigation and emerging DNA genealogy technology. To locate the beneficiary, this search shall continue until she is found or until 50 years have passed since my death. He was looking for me. I whispered. He never stopped. James said softly, "Leonard was a difficult man. Eleanor. He was hard on Margaret when she was young. He drove her away, but he spent the last 15 years of his life trying to fix it. He wanted to know you." I turned the page. The next document was a photocopy of a hospital discharge summary. It was heavily redacted. Black bars covered the patient's name and address, but the dates were visible. Date of birth, May 3rd, 1994. Time, 4:17 in the morning. Sex, female. Discharge, to private arrangement / Mark and Diane C. The last name was cut off, but the C was visible. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Private arrangement. And this? James said, sliding a stapled document toward me. This is the most important one. It was a contract. It looked amateurish, typed on a typewriter that had a misalignment in the letter E. The header read, Custody Transfer Agreement. It was dated 3 days after my birth. I, Margaret Hartley, being of sound mind but limited means, do hereby relinquish all parental rights and physical custody of my female infant to Mark and Diane Collins, who agree to raise the child as their own. Considerations. The Collins family agrees to provide for the child's financial, medical, and educational needs. The Collins family agrees to maintain a closed arrangement, with no contact from the biological mother, unless mutually agreed upon at a later date. There was a signature at the bottom, Margaret Hartley. The handwriting was shaky, jagged, as if she had been crying or trembling when she signed it. Below it were 2 firm, bold signatures, Mark Collins, Diane Collins. They signed it, I said, my voice sounding hollow. They signed a contract like they were buying a used car. It was an informal adoption. James said, it was not illegal, per se, but it bypassed the agency safeguards. It bypassed the waiting lists. It was a direct handover. Margaret was 20 years old. She was alone. She had no money, and Leonard had cut her off for getting pregnant out of wedlock. She thought she was doing the right thing. She thought she was giving you a chance at a stability she could not provide. He paused, then reached into the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of a letter, but there is one more thing you need to know, James said. His voice hardened slightly. What? I asked. 5 years ago, when DNA testing first started becoming popular, I got a hit on a distant cousin who lived in Riverton. I started building a tree. I narrowed it down to a few families who had children your age. He pushed the letter toward me. I found the Collins family. James said, I saw your picture on your father's company website. You have the Hartley eyes. I was 90% sure. So, I wrote to them. I looked at the letter. It was dated 5 years ago. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Collins, I am writing to you regarding a sensitive family matter. I represent the estate of Leonard Hartley. We are searching for a child born to Margaret Hartley in May of 1994, who we believe was placed in your care. I looked up at James. You wrote to them? 5 years ago? Yes, and? James pulled out another piece of paper. It was a printout of an email. From Mark Collins, Collins, H. V. A. C.com, to J. Hartley, ENG.net. Subject, Inquiry. Mr. Hartley, we do not know who you are, but you are mistaken. We have no connection to a Margaret Hartley. Our daughter is our own. Do not contact this family again. If you persist, we will contact the authorities regarding harassment. I stared at the email. The date stamp was 5 years ago. I was 25. I whispered, I was living in this city. I was struggling to pay for my car repairs. I was crying to my therapist about how I felt like I didn't belong. They knew. James said, they knew exactly who you were. They knew your grandfather had died and left you a trust, and they chose to lie. They chose to threaten me rather than tell you the truth. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. This wasn't just about a birthday party anymore. This wasn't just about humiliation. This was theft. This was 5 years of my life where I could have known. I could have met Leonard? No, James said gently. Leonard passed right before I sent the letter. But you could have known, Margaret. You could have known me. I stood up. The chair screeched against the floor. I have to go. I said, Eleanor. James stood up too. Where are you going? I am going to ask them. I said, my hands were balled into fists. I am going to ask them why they threatened you. Do you want me to come with you? James asked. No. I said, I need to do this. But can I take these? I gestured to the copies. Keep them, James said. They are yours. I grabbed the papers and shoved them into my bag. I felt a cold, hard rage settling in my chest, displacing the fear. I walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. I drove to the suburbs like I was on autopilot. The familiarity of the road, the turn onto Oak Street, the manicured hedges of the subdivision, felt nauseating. It was a movie set I had walked through for 30 years, thinking it was real life. I pulled into the driveway. Mark's truck was there. Diane's SUV was there. I took my phone out. I texted Maya and Jonah. I am at their house. I am going in. If I do not text you in an hour, come get me. Maya replied instantly. We are 10 minutes away. We are parking down the street just in case. I hit the record button on my voice memo app. I slipped the phone into the front pocket of my hoodie, the microphone facing out. I did not knock. I still had a key. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The house smelled the same. Lemon polish and potpourri. It was silent. Mom? Dad? I called out. There was a rustling from the den. Mark appeared in the hallway, wearing his weekend golf attire. He looked annoyed, but when he saw my face, his expression shifted to wariness. Ellie, he said, we did not expect you. I thought you were ignoring us. Diane appeared behind him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her eyes were red and puffy. Ellie, honey, she said, her voice trembling. Oh, thank God. Are you ready to talk? We have been so worried. I walked into the living room. I did not sit down. I stood in the center of the rug, the Persian rug they had bought the year I turned 16. and looked at them. "Who is James Hartley?" I asked. The reaction was instantaneous. Mark's face turned a shade of purple I had only seen when his football team lost. Diane went pale, her hand flying to her throat. "Who?" Mark blustered. "I do not know any James Hartley." "Stop it," I said. I pulled the papers out of my bag. I held up the email printout, the one where you threatened to call the police on him 5 years ago. Mark stared at the paper. The air left the room. "You have been talking to him," Mark said. His voice was low. "Dangerous." "Yes," I said. "I met him this morning. He showed me everything. The will, the trust, the contract you signed with Margaret." Diane let out a small whimper. Mark stepped forward, his fists clenching. "That man is a shark." Mark spat. "He is a manipulative opportunist. He is trying to get his hands on our family business. He is feeding you lies." "Ellie." "Lies?" I laughed. A sharp, jagged sound. "The documents are notarized." "Dad, I saw Margaret's signature. I saw yours." I turned to Diane. "You told me I was a mistake at the party. You let people think you had an affair. But you knew. You knew I was Margaret's baby. You knew she gave me to you because she was destitute and scared." Diane sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. "We were protecting you," Mark shouted. "He is twisting everything. We saved you." "Ellie." Margaret was a mess. She was a child herself. She lived in a trailer. She could not feed you. We took you in. We gave you a life. We gave you this house, your education, everything. And then you lied to me for 30 years, I said. And when her brother tried to find me, you threatened him. Why? "Because you are ours," Mark roared. He slammed his hand against the wall. "We raised you. We put in the work. Biology is nothing. We are your real parents. That man, he is just looking for a payout. He wants to drag you into some legal mess to get a cut of this trust he talks about. There is no payout for him." I said, my voice steady. "The trust is for me. Leonard Hartley left it for me, and you blocked me from knowing about it." Diane looked up. Her face streaked with tears. "We did not want you to be confused," she sobbed. "We were afraid you would leave us. If you knew you had rich relatives, we thought you would think we weren't good enough. So you humiliated me instead?" I asked. "You put up a slide saying I had 0% DNA just to—" "What? Prove a point?" Mark crossed his arms. He looked defiant, like a general refusing to surrender a lost position. I wanted to get out ahead of it. He said, "What?" I asked. I knew that guy was sniffing around again. Mark said, "I saw a hit on the Ancestry site a few weeks ago. I knew he was close. I figured, if we do the DNA test, if we show the world that we love you despite the genetics, then when he comes crawling out of the woodwork, you will already know where you stand. You will know who really loves you." I stared at him. The twisted logic was suffocating. "You humiliated me to mark your territory." I said, "You weaponized my identity to beat a man I had never met. It was a strategy." Mark said, shrugging. "It went a little wrong." "Sure, but I was protecting this family." I felt sick. I looked at Diane. She was weeping, rocking back and forth. "Mom," I said, "did you know?" "About the letters?" Diane froze. Her eyes darted to the hallway, specifically, toward the master bedroom. "What letters?" Mark cut in quickly. There were no letters, but I had seen Diane's look. It was a look of pure panic. I remembered the shoebox. When I was 10. I was playing hide and seek in their room. I had climbed up the shelves in the walk-in closet. I had found a shoebox on the top shelf, pushed all the way to the back. It was taped shut. Diane had come in and screamed at me. She had spanked me, the only time she ever had. She said it was tax papers, and I was never to touch it. I looked at the hallway. "Ellie, do not," Mark said. Stepping in front of me, I dodged him. I ran down the hallway. "Ellie, get back here." I burst into their bedroom. I didn't care about privacy anymore. I tore open the closet door. It was still there. The closet was organized by color. Diane's neuroticism on full display, but on the top shelf, Behind a stack of hat boxes was the old Nike shoebox. It looked dusty. I dragged a chair over. Mark was in the doorway now, his face red. "That is private property," he yelled. "I will call the police. Eleanor, call them," I screamed back, grabbing the box. "Call them and tell them you kidnapped a child and stole her inheritance." I jumped down from the chair. I threw the box onto the bed. The tape was yellow and peeling. I ripped the lid off. It wasn't tax papers. It was full of envelopes, dozens of them. Some were small, pink and blue, the kind you buy for birthdays. Some were business envelopes with the return address, Hartley Associates. I reached in and grabbed a handful. I looked at the first one, a pink envelope with a picture of a bear on it. To Eleanor, on her 5th birthday. From, "Your Margaret." The seal was broken. It had been opened. I pulled out the card. A $5 bill fluttered out. "My sweet baby, I hope you are happy. I think about you every day. Please know that I love you. Love, Margaret." I dropped the card. I picked up another one, a business envelope. To Mark and Diane Collins. From Leonard Hartley. Date, August 14th, 1998. I opened it. Inside was a carbon copy of a check. Paid to the order of Mark and Diane Collins. Amount, $500. Memo. Monthly stipend for Eleanor's care. I dug deeper. There were bundles of them. Checks, receipts. January 1999, $500. February 1999, $500. March 2005, $750. They went on for years. I turned around slowly to face my parents. Mark was leaning against the doorframe, looking defeated but sullen. Diane was sobbing in the hallway. "You took money," I said. The realization hit me like a physical blow. "You told me we were struggling. You made me take out student loans. You made me work 2 jobs in college." "Mark, tell her," Diane wailed. "Tell her we used it for the house." Mark straightened his collar. "It was for the family. Ellie, money is money. It all goes into the same pot. We fed you, didn't we? We put a roof over your head. That money was reimbursement for the expenses of raising a child." Reimbursement? I held up a birthday card from Margaret. Was this reimbursement? She sent me $5 and a note saying she loved me. And you opened it, took the money, and hid the card? I opened the card in my hand. It was empty. The cash was gone. "You stole $5 from a 5-year-old. I whispered, "You stole my mother's words." Mark stepped into the room. "Give me the box. Ellie, you are distraught. You are not thinking clearly. Do not touch me." I said. I backed away, clutching the box to my chest. I looked at the receipts again. The dates went up until I was 18. 18 years of checks, probably over $100,000, plus the emotional theft. The letters from Leonard asking for updates. The photos Margaret had sent. I saw one peeking out, a blurry photo of a woman with dark hair holding a baby. "You cashed the checks," I said, my voice rising. "You cashed them, and you never told me they existed. You used me as an income stream." Mark's face twisted into a sneer. "Don't be naive. Do you know how much braces cost? Do you know how much dance lessons cost? That pittance from the Hartleys barely covered the basics. We did you a favor. We managed the funds. And the trust?" I asked. "The one Leonard left? Did you try to get your hands on that too?" Mark didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence screamed the truth. If they could have accessed it, they would have. I looked at Diane. She was a broken heap on the floor. But I felt no pity, only disgust. "You are not my parents," I said. "Parents protect their children. Parents tell the truth. You are just jailers. You kept me here, kept me ignorant, so you could keep cashing the checks. I am walking out of here," I said. "I am taking this box. And if you try to stop me, I have Maya and Jonah down the street, and I have James Hartley's lawyer on speed dial." Mark hesitated. He looked at the box, then at me. He saw the coldness in my eyes, a reflection of the stranger he had created. "Go," he spat. "Go running to your rich uncle. See if he puts up with your moods like we did." I walked past him. I stepped over Diane's legs in the hallway. I walked out the front door, the shoebox under my arm. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful, crisp autumn day. I walked down the driveway, past the manicured lawn, past the mailbox where, for 18 years, checks had arrived for a girl who never knew they existed. I saw Maya's car idling at the corner. She honked when she saw me. I started to run. I ran toward the car, clutching the box of stolen memories, leaving the house on Oak Street behind forever. The downtown office tower was a monolith of glass and steel, reflecting the gray morning sky of Riverton. I stood in the lobby of the 34th floor, pressing the heels of my hands into my thighs, trying to feel the solid ground beneath me. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I counted the sensory details, just as Dr. Patel had taught me. The hum of the elevator bank, the smell of stale commercial coffee, the tightness of my blazer across my shoulders, the taste of mint on my tongue, the sight of Maya sitting on a leather bench near the security desk, her purple hair the only splash of color in a room designed to intimidate. "You look like a warrior," Maya said, standing up as I approached. She did not hug me. She knew I was holding myself together with a fragile tension that might snap if squeezed too hard. "I am going to be right here. I have a book, I have snacks, and I have a charger. I am not moving until you come out. Thank you," I whispered. James Hartley was standing by the window, looking out at the city sprawl. He turned when he saw me. He looked impeccable in a navy suit, his face grave but calm. Beside him was our attorney, Mr. Sterling, no relation to the client my father had tried to impress at the party. A man with sharp eyes and a briefcase that looked heavy enough to crack concrete. "Are you ready?" "Eleanor?" James asked. "No," I said honestly, "but let's get it over with." We walked down the long corridor to the conference room. The placard on the door read, "Mediation Room B." It sounded so sterile, so bureaucratic. Inside, it was just a room, a long oval table, ergonomic chairs, and a pitcher of water that was sweating onto the mahogany. Judge Franklin was already there. He was a retired circuit court judge, a man with a shock of white hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He sat at the head of the table, reviewing a stack of files. "Please, take a seat," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We are just waiting for the other party." We sat on the left side of the table. James placed his hands on the table, clasped loosely. I put my notebook down. Inside it was the statement I had written and rewritten a dozen times since I found the shoebox. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Typical. I muttered, it was a power move. Mark Collins never arrived anywhere on time unless he was the one being paid. Finally, the door opened. Mark walked in first. He looked smaller than I remembered. His suit, usually tailored to hide his bulk, looked loose. His face was gray, the ruddy complexion of the party replaced by a pallor of stress and sleepless nights. Diane followed him. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, which she took off slowly to reveal eyes that were swollen and rimmed with red. She clutched her purse to her chest as if she were walking through a bad neighborhood. And then, Kara. I had not expected Kara to come. My sister, no, the woman I had grown up with, walked in with her head high, but her eyes were darting around the room nervously. She caught my gaze and gave a small, jerky nod. She took a seat not next to our parents, but at the far end of the table, slightly removed from their united front. Mark's lawyer, a slick man named Kessler, who smelled of expensive cologne, bustled in last, apologizing for the traffic in a way that suggested he did not care at all. Judge Franklin cleared his throat. "We are here to conduct a mediation regarding the claims of Eleanor Hartley against Mark and Diane Collins, as well as the accounting of the Leonard Hartley Trust," he began. His eyes swept the room. "I want to set some ground rules. This is not a courtroom. There is no jury. We are here to find a resolution. I expect civility. I expect honesty. And I expect us to focus on the facts." He paused, looking over his reading glasses at Mark and Diane. "I must note," he added, that it is highly unusual for a trustee to be advocating for an adult child against the parents who raised her. The documentation I have reviewed is troubling. I suggest we proceed with that gravity in mind. Mark stiffened. Kessler placed a hand on his arm to silence him. We would like to start with an opening statement from Ms. Hartley. Mr. Sterling said. I stood up. My knees felt like water. I looked at the piece of paper in my hands. The words swam for a second, then snapped into focus. I looked at Mark. He was staring at the wall, his jaw clenched. I looked at Diane. She was picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. I am 30 years old. I began, my voice shaking before finding a lower, steadier register. For 30 years, I was Ellie Collins. I was the difficult child, the odd one out, the one who did not have the nose, or the grace, or the business sense. I took a breath. 2 weeks ago, on my birthday, my parents stood up in front of a room full of strangers and presented a slideshow proving I was not related to them. They laughed. They called it a joke. They used my identity as a prop for a party trick. I saw Kara flinch. Mark's jaw tightened. I thought that was the worst of it. I continued. I thought the humiliation was the crime. But then I found the box. I reached into my bag and pulled out a photocopy of the checks I had found in the closet. I slid it across the table. I found 18 years of checks from my grandfather, Leonard Hartley, checks written for the care of Eleanor Hartley, checks that were cashed by Mark and Diane Collins, deposited into their accounts. While they told me we had no money, while they told me I had to take out loans, while they told me I should be grateful they kept me, I looked directly at Diane. You stole my money, but that is the least of it. You stole my name. You stole my history. You stole the chance for me to know my grandfather before he died. You stole the letters my birth mother sent me. You intercepted love that was meant for me and you hid it in a closet like it was contraband. I sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. Kessler, the lawyer, cleared his throat. He adjusted his tie. We understand that emotions are high, Kessler said, his tone smooth and patronizing. And we acknowledge that the birthday presentation was ill-advised. Mark and Diane have admitted that was a mistake in judgment. He opened a folder. However, we must look at the context. Mark and Diane Collins took in an infant who had no place to go. They entered into a private arrangement to provide a stable home. Yes, they received funds from the Hartley family, but any parent knows that raising a child costs far more than $500 a month. They fed Ellie, they clothed her, they paid for the roof over her head. They viewed those checks as reimbursement for the immense cost of child rearing. He gestured to Mark and Diane. These are not criminals, Your Honor. These are parents who were overwhelmed. They made administrative mistakes. Maybe they should have set up a separate account. Maybe they should have been more transparent, but they did the heavy lifting of parenting for 3 decades. Does a technical financial error outweigh 30 years of bedtime stories and doctor visits? Diane sniffled loudly. We loved her, she whispered. We just wanted her to be ours. Judge Franklin looked unimpressed. He made a note on his pad. Administrative mistakes, James repeated quietly. He had been silent until now. Is that what we are calling it? James reached for a laptop that was set up on the table. We received a video file yesterday, James said. It was sent anonymously by a relative who was at the party. I think it is important for us to establish the mindset of the defendants regarding their daughter. He turned the laptop so the screen faced the judge and the opposing side. He pressed play. The audio was tinny but clear. The clinking of silverware. The hum of conversation. Then, Mark's voice booming. She has never really been one of us, right? The laughter on the recording was raucous. Then Diane's voice. We made a mistake, but we chose to love Ellie anyway. Then, the camera panned to Mark and Diane at the head table. They were not looking at me with affection. They were looking at the crowd, beaming, soaking up the attention. They looked like performers who had just nailed a punchline. Be grateful we kept you. Mark's voice on the recording screamed, the anger sudden and visceral. James paused the video. The freeze frame showed Mark's face twisted in a snarl. his finger pointing at the camera, pointing at me. Casual cruelty, James said. That is not the behavior of parents who made an administrative error. That is the behavior of people who view their child as a possession they can mock, a possession they can profit from. Mark's face was scarlet. That is out of context, he shouted. I was stressed. She was making a scene. You made the scene, Mark. Kara spoke up. Everyone turned to look at her. Kara's hands were trembling on the table. You put that slide up, Kara said, her voice rising. I told you not to. I told Mom it was weird, and you laughed. You said, wait until she sees it. It will put her in her place. Kara, quiet. Mark snapped. No, Kara said, tears spilling over. I am not going to be quiet. You guys have lied about everything. You told me I was the miracle baby. You told me Ellie was the difficult one, but you were taking money for her the whole time? You were cashing checks while you made her wear my hand-me-downs? She looked at me across the table. I am so sorry. Ellie, she sobbed. I didn't know about the money, I swear. I nodded to her, a lump forming in my throat. It was the first time in my life Kara had stood against them for me. Judge Franklin held up a hand. The video speaks to the emotional environment. But we are here to discuss the trust and the concealment of assets. James leaned forward. There is one more thing, he said. He looked at me, then at Mark and Diane. Throughout this process, Mark and Diane have insisted that they were saving Eleanor, that her birth mother, Margaret, was unfit, that she abandoned her daughter. Diane sat up straighter, clutching a tissue. She was a drug addict. Diane spat out. She lived in a trailer park. She gave Ellie away because she couldn't handle the responsibility. We saved her life. James looked at Diane with a cold, hard stare. Margaret was 20 years old. James said, she was suffering from postpartum depression, and she had no support system because our father had cut her off. She made a decision out of desperation, trusting you to be good people. He paused. But people change. People recover. James looked at the door of the conference room. I have located Margaret, he said. The air left the room. I felt my heart hammer against my ribs. She is alive. James continued. She has been sober for 25 years. She works as a librarian in Oregon. She has spent every birthday for the last 30 years writing a letter to a daughter she was told she was never allowed to contact. Diane let out a strangled gasp. That is a lie, she hissed. She is dead. We heard she died. You heard what you wanted to hear, James said. He looked at me. She is here. Eleanor. My hands flew to my mouth. Here? She is waiting in the reception area, James said. She flew in last night. She knows everything. She knows about the party. She knows about the checks. She is not here to force anything on you. She said she would only come in if you wanted her to. No, Diane shrieked. She stood up, her chair tipping over. You cannot bring her here. This is an ambush. She abandoned her rights. She signed the paper. She signed a piece of paper 30 years ago. Kara yelled at her mother. Stop it, Ma. Mom, just stop. Diane turned on Kara. You are taking their side? After everything we gave you? I am looking at the facts. Kara screamed back, and the facts are that you guys are liars. Mark was purple with rage. He pointed a shaking finger at James. You brought her here to emotionalize this. You are trying to manipulate the settlement. I am trying to restore what you stole, James said calmly, which is a family. Judge Franklin slammed his hand on the table. Order, he bellowed. Sit down. Mrs. Collins, sit down. Mr. Collins? Diane sank back into her chair, weeping hysterically. She is going to steal her. She moaned. She is going to steal my daughter. Judge Franklin adjusted his glasses. He looked at the trust documents in front of him. Then he looked at Mark and Diane. I have a question, the judge said. His voice was quiet, piercing through the noise of Diane's sobs. He picked up the photocopy of the check. You claim that Eleanor was your daughter, that you loved her as your own, that biology did not matter. Yes, Mark insisted. Yes, absolutely. Then answer me this, Judge Franklin said. If she was your daughter, if she was Ellie Collins, why did you spend 18 years cashing checks made out to the benefit of Eleanor Hartley? The room went dead silent. You cannot have it both ways. Mr. Collins, the judge said, you cannot claim she is your child for the sake of love, but treat her as a financial asset under another name for the sake of the bank account. By cashing those checks, you acknowledge the trust. You acknowledge that the money belonged to Eleanor Hartley, and by hiding that fact from her, you committed a breach of fiduciary duty that is breathtaking in its scope. Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at his lawyer. Kessler was staring at his shoes, knowing the case was lost. The judge turned to me. Ms. Hartley, he said, we will proceed with the financial negotiations. My preliminary view is that a full forensic accounting is required, and restitution will be significant. But I believe you have a decision to make that has nothing to do with money. He gestured toward the door. I looked at James. He nodded slightly. I stood up. Where are you going? Diane whispered. Her voice was broken, small. Ellie, please, don't go out there. She doesn't know you. We know you. We know your favorite color. We know you are allergic to penicillin. Please. I looked at the woman who had raised me. I saw the fear in her eyes. It was not fear for me. It was fear of being alone. It was fear of losing the prop she had polished for 30 years. You know my allergies. Diane, I said softly, but you do not know me. You never wanted to know me. You just wanted me to fit the frame you bought. I looked at Kara. Call me later? I asked. Kara nodded, wiping her eyes. Go, she mouthed. I walked to the door of the conference room. My hand hovered over the handle. On the other side of that wood was a woman named Margaret, a woman who had written me letters. A woman who had sent $5 I never received. A woman who had waited 25 years in the hope that one day the door would open. I did not know if I could love her. I did not know if we would get along. I did not know if she was the mother I had dreamed of in my lonely moments. But I knew one thing. I was done being Ellie Collins. The mistake. I was ready to be Eleanor Hartley, the woman who survived. I pushed the door open. The hallway was bright. At the far end, near the window, a woman stood up. She had dark hair streaked with gray. She was wearing a simple blue dress. She looked nervous. She looked hopeful. And when she saw me, she didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just brought her hand to her chest, right over her heart, and let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a lifetime. I took the first step toward her, then the second. Behind me, the door clicked shut, sealing away the lies of the past. Ahead of me, the future was unwritten, terrifying, and completely beautifully mine. Thank you so much for listening to Ellie's story. It is a journey that reminds us that family isn't just about blood, but about truth, respect, and the courage to find your own identity when the world tries to define it for you. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Drop a comment below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more emotional, gripping dramas. Don't forget to share your thoughts on Mark and Diane's actions in the comments. Do you think they ever truly loved Ellie, or was it all about control? Until next time, take care of yourselves.